Have you ever noticed that the moment you start pulling away, the person who once acted so distant suddenly starts chasing you? The one who seemed unaffected by your silence now starts noticing everything you do. This isn't coincidence. It's fear. The fear of losing the very person they once took for granted. Because even avoidants who hide behind emotional walls can't escape one truth. Losing someone who truly cared for them shakes them to their core. When an avoidant begins to fear losing you, something powerful starts to stir inside them, something they can't quite name or control. For most of their life, they've built emotional walls, telling themselves they don't need anyone. That closeness only leads to pain. But the moment they sense your energy pulling away, a deep, almost primitive fear awakens. The fear of being truly alone. It's not just about missing your presence. It's about realizing that your emotional availability, your patience, and your steady presence had become a quiet form of safety for them. Suddenly, the distance they once thought would bring peace now feels like an echo chamber of silence. Avoidants are not heartless. They are wounded souls who have learned to associate intimacy with danger. Somewhere in their past, love might have felt conditional, unpredictable, or suffocating, so they learn to protect themselves by shutting down, by avoiding emotional dependence. But when someone like you enters their life, someone who sees beyond their defensive silence and connects with the softness they hide, it changes them. You become the emotional mirror they never knew they needed. And when that mirror begins to fade, when you stop chasing, stop checking in, stop trying to fix things, that's when their fear surfaces. This fear doesn't show up as dramatic confessions or emotional breakdowns. It appears quietly in the stillness of the night when they scroll through old conversations, in the moments they check your online status but can't bring themselves to send a message. It's that tightness in their chest when they realize you haven't reached out in days. For someone who's spent so long suppressing emotion, these sensations feel foreign and uncomfortable. They won't always name it as fear, but it is the fear of losing the one person who made emotional connection feel safe. They start questioning themselves in ways they never did before. Did I push too hard? Did I make them feel unwanted? Have I finally driven them away? For a person who lives in emotional control, this kind of self-reflection feels like chaos. They're used to being the one who withdraws first, to maintaining distance as a shield. But now, for the first time, they're not in control of the space between you, and that loss of control terrifies them. You might notice subtle changes in their energy. They'll find excuses to reach out, maybe under the pretense of something casual, just to see if you respond. They'll start remembering small details, things they never seemed to notice before. It's not manipulation, it's awakening. It's the moment when emotional denial collides with emotional truth. When they realize that they do feel, they do care, and the idea of losing you is far more painful than the vulnerability they've spent their life avoiding. This fear becomes a mirror for their own emotional depth. They begin to understand that their avoidance was never strength, it was survival. But now, that survival instinct feels outdated because what they truly crave is connection. And while they may still struggle to express it, you'll sense it in the pauses, the hesitation, the unspoken longing. That's the moment they start to emotionally awaken. Not because you forced them to, but because the potential of losing you revealed how much they had to lose. So when an avoidant fears losing you, it's not just about love, it's about awakening. It's the first crack in their emotional armor, the first glimpse of a truth they've long denied, that connection doesn't destroy them, isolation does. And sometimes it takes the quiet fear of losing someone real to remind them what being alive actually feels like. When an avoidant fears losing you, their behavior doesn't shift in obvious or dramatic ways. It's subtle, almost invisible to the untrained eye, but if you've known their patterns, you'll sense the change. Avoidants have mastered the art of control. They don't beg, they don't chase, and they rarely confess. But when fear starts creeping in, that control begins to loosen, and you'll see it in the smallest gestures, the ones that reveal more than words ever could. You might notice they start appearing in your online spaces more often, liking a post they'd usually ignore, replying to stories, or suddenly bringing up an inside joke from the past. To them, it's not flirting or reconnecting, it's testing the water. They're quietly checking if you're still emotionally available, if the bond they once took for granted is still alive. This is their language of fear, subtle, indirect, but deeply intentional. Avoidants don't know how to say, I miss you, because vulnerability feels unsafe. Instead, they communicate through small openings, hoping you'll meet them halfway without them having to fully step out of their emotional armor. They might ask about something trivial. Did you ever fix that thing? Or how's work going? But beneath those surface level words lies a deeper question. Do you still care? Each small attempt is their way of re-establishing emotional contact while maintaining a sense of safety. What's interesting is that these shifts often appear inconsistent. One day, They'll reach out with warmth and familiarity. The next, they might withdraw again. It's not because they've lost interest, but because every act of reaching out triggers their inner conflict. Fear pulls them toward you, but vulnerability pushes them back. They're trying to balance their need for emotional connection with their fear of rejection. This internal struggle makes their actions appear confusing from the outside, but to them it's survival, a delicate dance between longing and defense. They also become more attentive. Even if they try to hide it, they'll remember small details about you, things they never seemed to notice before. They might bring up a conversation from months ago or mention something that shows they've been paying attention all along. These are the cracks in their emotional wall, moments where their genuine attachment begins to surface. When they sense your distance, their mind starts to replay your past moments together. They remember the safety, the laughter, the way you made them feel seen without judgment. And that nostalgia becomes their quiet motivator to stay connected, even if only from afar. Another subtle sign is the way they manage conversations. Avoidants usually keep emotional discussions shallow or quickly divert to neutral topics. But when they fear losing you, they start to linger. Their replies become slightly longer, their tone softer, their questions more personal. It's not a conscious decision. It's their heart overriding their defense mechanisms. They might not say much, but there's a shift in energy. A sense of care sneaks back into their words. Sometimes they even test your boundaries just to see if you'll respond emotionally. They might withdraw suddenly, hoping you'll chase them, not because they want control, but because they're desperate for reassurance that you still feel something too. It's a strange and painful pattern, reaching for closeness through distance. But for avoidance, it's the only way they know how to feel safe while still trying to reconnect. These subtle shifts in behavior are their emotional language, quiet gestures that speak louder than words. When they fear losing you, they won't confess it directly, but their actions will start to contradict their old patterns. You'll sense warmth where there used to be coldness, curiosity where there was once disinterest, and effort where there used to be avoidance. It's their unspoken way of saying, I'm still here. Not in the way you might wish, not with full emotional openness, but in the only way they know how, beneath every small text, every random memory, every quiet check in. There's an invisible truth. Their fear of losing you is awakening something real, something they've spent their whole life running from, the need to truly connect. When an avoidant fears losing you, they enter a deep internal conflict that pulls them in two opposite directions. One part of them longs to reach out, to hold on to the bond that feels like safety, while another part urges them to retreat before they get hurt. This push-pull dynamic is one of the most confusing experiences for both sides because it's not driven by manipulation, but by fear. Fear of closeness, fear of rejection, fear of needing someone who might not stay. And yet, beneath all that fear lies something simple and human. They care more than they're willing to admit. Avoidants grow up learning that emotional intimacy often leads to pain. Maybe they had to be independent too early. Maybe they were told that emotions made them weak. Or maybe love in their past was unpredictable. Whatever the cause, they learn to protect themselves by staying emotionally distant. But when they meet someone who genuinely understands them, who offers calm instead of chaos, they experience something unfamiliar, safety and connection. It feels good, but it also feels dangerous because it awakens needs they've long suppressed. So when that connection feels threatened, they panic. Yet, instead of reaching out in vulnerability, they go to what they know best control through distance. This is where the push-pull begins. One moment they'll text you, open up slightly, or share a memory that makes you think they're finally softening. And just when you start to believe the wall is breaking down, they suddenly pull away again. They go cold, distant, and emotionally unavailable. You're left wondering what happened, but inside them there's a storm of confusion. When they moved closer, their fear of rejection was triggered. When they pulled back, their fear of loss grew stronger. It's a painful emotional tug of war that neither side wins. They might even convince themselves that detachment is strength, that pulling away protects them from the pain of losing you. But in reality, every withdrawal deepens their longing. They replay your last words, analyze your tone, and question if you've already moved on. They may distract themselves with work, hobbies, or even other people, but nothing truly replaces the connection they had with you. This cycle of approach and avoidance becomes their emotional pattern, not because they don't care, but because they care so deeply it terrifies them. You'll notice that during this phase, they send mixed signals. They'll show affection, then retreat. They'll talk about missing you, then disappear for days. It's not indifference. It's emotional self-protection. They're torn between the comfort of closeness and the illusion of control. Every time they get too close, their defense mechanisms scream, it's not safe. But every time they pull away, their heart whispers, you're losing something real. This battle continues until one side becomes too painful to ignore. If you've ever been on the receiving end of this behavior, it can feel exhausting. You might mistake it for emotional games, but what you're really witnessing is someone trying to navigate their deepest fears with the only tools they've ever known: avoidance and withdrawal. Inside, they wish they could stay close without losing themselves. They wish they could express love without feeling trapped by it. But years of emotional conditioning don't unravel overnight. When an avoidant fears losing you, this internal battle is the loudest it's ever been. Their mind says run, but their heart says stay. Their actions look inconsistent, but their emotions are painfully real. They're not trying to hurt you, they're trying to protect themselves from what feels like emotional annihilation. And sometimes the only way they start to grow is when they realize that running doesn't stop the pain, it just delays it. That the safety they're searching for doesn't come from distance, but from courage. Courage to stay, to feel, to trust. Because eventually every avoidant learns that real connection doesn't destroy their independence, it heals it. And that truth only reveals itself when the fear of losing you becomes greater than the fear of being vulnerable. When an avoidant finally begins to realize they are losing you, something inside them shifts. At first, they convince themselves it's fine, that they can handle it, that they don't really need you. They repeat the same mantra they've always used to stay safe: I'm better on my own. But with time, that emotional numbness begins to wear off, and what replaces it is something they can't easily suppress: the deep awareness that silence doesn't equal peace. It equals loss, and for the first time, they begin to understand the emotional cost of the distance they created. Avoidants often mistake independence for strength. They believe that needing someone is a sign of weakness, that detachment protects them from pain. But when they start losing the person who once made them feel understood, the truth hits differently. They realize that your presence didn't take away their freedom. It gave their independence meaning. You were the safe space where they could rest emotionally, even if they rarely showed it. So when you begin to withdraw, when your energy changes, when your messages stop coming, they feel it more than they'll ever admit. The silence that once felt comforting now feels like rejection. In the early stages of this realization, they'll try to distract themselves. They might dive into work, spend time with friends, or scroll endlessly through social media just to fill the emptiness. But no matter what they do, there's an unspoken awareness following them, the awareness that something valuable is slipping away. They may even tell themselves that they don't care, but deep down, they know that your absence has created a void that no one else can fill. It's not just losing a person, it's losing emotional safety, something they rarely find and often don't recognize until it's gone. You'll notice that during this period, they start reflecting more, they replay conversations. Think about the times you were patient with them, the times you tried to understand their silence. They start to see your efforts differently now, not as pressure, but as love. This is when regret starts to surface, and it's one of the hardest emotions for an avoidant to process because it directly challenges their self-image. They've always believed that staying detached was the right thing, the safe thing, but now detachment feels like punishment. This realization also triggers guilt. They remember the times they shut you out, the times they acted cold or indifferent, and they start to see how those defenses pushed away the very thing they wanted most: connection. Yet instead of rushing back to fix things, they often freeze. Their mind tells them they should reach out, but their fear of rejection holds them back. They imagine what they'd say if they could undo the distance. But words don't come easily to someone who's spent their life avoiding emotions. So they stay silent, hoping that somehow you'll reach out first. Internally, however, they're not the same. They begin to understand that silence doesn't protect them, it isolates them. That emotional control isn't power, it's loneliness. Losing you becomes a mirror that forces them to face themselves, to see that all their walls didn't keep them safe, they kept them separate. And for the first time, the pain of separation outweighs the fear of intimacy. This stage is often where transformation begins. When avoidants truly grasp what their distance has cost them, it stirs something raw and real. They may not show it outwardly, but inside, a quiet realization grows: love cannot survive behind walls. They understand that your patience, your consistency, and your willingness to see their heart were not signs of weakness, but strength. And that recognition that they pushed away someone who loved them without conditions lingers deeply. In the end, the realization of loss becomes the breaking point that forces them to confront their patterns. Because losing someone who saw through their walls isn't just about heartbreak, it's about awakening. They begin to see that connection was never their enemy, fear was. And once they face that truth, even if they don't immediately return, they will never be the same again. When an avoidant reaches the point where the fear of losing someone they care about becomes too real to ignore, something profound begins to happen inside them. It's no longer about running or protecting themselves. It becomes about questioning why they've spent their life doing so. For avoidance, emotional growth doesn't come from comfort. It comes from loss, from facing the emptiness their patterns have created. The fear of losing you can act as a mirror that forces them to confront the truth they've been avoiding for years. Avoiding love doesn't stop the pain, it just postpones it. At first, this growth doesn't look graceful. It begins with discomfort, sleepless nights, restless thoughts, and a lingering itch they can't explain away. They start to notice how often they shut people out, how easily they disconnect when things feel too intimate. In their solitude, they begin to understand that their silence wasn't peace, it was defense. They realize that real love, isn't about control or distance. It's about the courage to be seen, to be known, and to risk being hurt. And that realization is where transformation quietly begins. When they fear losing you, their emotional guard starts to weaken. They might not say it out loud, but they begin to crave what once scared them: closeness. They start reflecting on their past relationships, the patterns that repeat, the moments they push people away for no reason other than fear. For perhaps the first time, they ask themselves, why do I keep doing this? Why am I so scared of someone caring about me? These questions are uncomfortable, but they open the door to self-awareness, something avoidants rarely allow themselves to feel. They may also begin to understand your pain in a way they never did before. In losing you, they see how their emotional walls didn't just protect them, they hurt others. They start to recognize the weight of their silence, the confusion their distance caused, and the loneliness the behavior created for both sides. This empathy marks a key turning point, because when avoidants start to see things not just from their perspective but from yours, it signals emotional maturity. It means they are beginning to understand connection beyond fear, and that awareness is growth. Some avoidants might try to reach out again, not because they need validation, but because they're beginning to see the importance of emotional accountability. Their messages might be simple, their gestures small, but the intention behind them is significant. It's their way of saying, I see now what I didn't before. Others may not reach out right away, but internally the transformation has begun. They start to break the narrative that vulnerability equals weakness. They start to learn that expressing emotion doesn't lead to rejection, it builds intimacy. And slowly they begin to replace avoidance with awareness. This process of emotional growth isn't fast or perfect. There will be moments where they slip back into old habits, where fear tempts them to retreat again. But the difference now is that they notice it. That awareness, the ability to catch themselves in their own pattern, is progress. Every time they feel the urge to withdraw but choose to stay present, they reclaim a part of themselves that fear once controlled. The truth is, emotional growth for avoidance doesn't come through comfort, it comes through connection. And the pain of losing it, the fear of losing someone they genuinely cared about, forces them to see what avoidance has cost them: genuine intimacy, emotional safety, and love that could have healed them. That loss becomes the teacher. It shows them that connection was never the danger. The danger was never allowing themselves to experience it fully. And when that realization sinks in, everything changes. They may not turn into open books overnight, but something inside them softens. They begin to crave honesty, consistency, and emotional truth, not out of desperation, but out of awareness. Because once an avoidant realizes that avoidance doesn't protect them, it imprisons them, they start walking toward healing. Slowly, quietly, and often alone, but with a newfound understanding of what love truly means.